Okay, so good to see so many folks there. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll go ahead and get started. I just want to say by way of introduction, thank you for joining us. I'm Michael Vasquez. I teach in the philosophy department here at UNC Chapel Hill. I also direct the outreach program in philosophy at the Parr Center for Ethics. And you may or may not know that since Monday, UNC has actually been celebrating the first ever Engagement Week. It's kind of a week-long celebration of the countless, and I mean countless, community partnerships and collaborations between the Carolina community and stakeholders, leaders, organizations across the state of North Carolina. There's been over 30 campus units involved. They've been touching on issues from like economic development to disaster preparedness, government, education, health, you name it. And today's session, today's panel, which is the last on the Engagement Week calendar, we're excited to be the kind of capstone and the bookend of the program, is going to highlight the interest and value of the humanities and of educational opportunities and spaces in prisons and in juvenile justice centers in the state of North Carolina. We're grateful to the Department of Philosophy and the Friday Center for Continuing Education for supporting and sponsoring this event, and to the Carolina Center for Public Service for hosting what's been a really impressive range of events and workshops this week for Engagement Week. We're also really grateful for our two guest panelists, who will be introduced in just a moment and who you'll hear from, for taking the time out of their day to be with us today, to share their knowledge, share their testimony, and to join in conversation with us about this really important topic. So in the first part of the session, we'll hear from a few folks about different dimensions of the topic of the interest and value of humanities and of educational opportunities and spaces. And then we'll move right into a discussion portion in which we strongly encourage you, whether while folks are talking or right at the end when we move to discussion, to submit a question in the chat. You can use the Q&A feature and we will be able to see it on our end. You can do that at any point throughout the webinar, so please make free and liberal use of that. And we would gladly take up your questions in the discussion portion and really take this opportunity to learn from you as well. So I'm going to hand it over now to Dr. Raphael Ginsberg from the Friday Center to get us started.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you to everyone who's here. Thank you, Ms. Wheeler and Titus, for being a part of this. And I'll say a little bit about my program, the Correctional Education Program, which is at UNC Chapel Hill, and it brings 4 credit courses to students in prison. And we do it in 2 ways: through the mail, in prison, to prisons all over the state, 55 prisons, and then also on site in 6 facilities. And I've been doing this job since 14, and this is, I'm going to say, the oldest prison education program in the country. It's been around since 1972 or 3 or something like that. So it's got a great history. We taught thousands of students. We're very grateful for the partnership with NCDPS and all of the support from across the UNC campus. I'm going to introduce the 3 people quickly, and then they will work their magic. And the first is Brook Wheeler, who's the Assistant Superintendent of NCDPS's North Carolina Department of Public Safety Prison Education Services. I've known Ms. Wheeler for, well, 3 jobs of yours, Ms. Wheeler. I don't know how many years, but you were at NCCIW at the women's prison, such fabulous leadership, and then to Granville prison, which was Polk, and again, just amazing leadership. And as principal of both of those facilities. And so I would work with her to arrange the classes, and I just saw the level of commitment both to me, to UNC, but also to the students. And it was always a delight to watch and inspiring. And now, fortunately for all of us doing higher ed work in North Carolina, she is at the system level. And so now I get to work with her in a different capacity, and it continues to be delightful. One newish initiative we're doing is the North Carolina Prison Education Consortium, which is a group of 10 schools doing higher ed and prison work across the state. So we've come together, and so Ms. Wheeler is on the steering committee of that, along with Dr. Jalal and others from NCDPS. And that's been really good to collaborate both across the academic institutions, but also with DPS. And we're looking forward to further integration and collaboration as we move to the future of prison education, which I think is full of promise. I've known Titus even longer than Ms. Wheeler. I think it was 12, Titus, that I taught you at Warren Correctional. I'm back at Warren now. It's taught there, started last Wednesday. And it makes me think of that first class with you, Titus, and it was probably the best class still. And Titus was an amazing student. It was public speaking, and I was fortunate to keep in touch with him. And we're all fortunate that he is now back and doing wonderful things. And it's been a delight just to be able to hang out with him and talk with him. And I'm grateful that he's here on this call. Finally, Michael Vasquez. Michael, if you can say a little bit about more your position in a moment, but just my subjective experience is another just wonderful person to work with. He came to UNC, he was right at the beginning of COVID, I think, or really close in time. And it's just such steady enthusiasm and commitment to this work. And so that for me meant he helped find instructors for our 4-credit courses. It really facilitated that, but also doing visionary work involving philosophy through the mail and the juvenile justice that I'm not a part of, but I know what it is, I know how hard it is, and I know the value of it. So I very much value him for that and just his partnership with me. So I'll leave it to you, Ms. Wheeler.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Ginsberg and Dr. Vasquez, for allowing me to be here and for inviting me. I consider it one of my greatest joys to be able to offer and assist with education services within the prisons. So as Dr. Ginsberg said, I have had 3 roles in this setting, but I also did teach in juvenile justice. I'm sorry, I was a principal in juvenile justice and in public school for 16 years after teaching in public school. So I've kind of had the range of experiences and somehow landed in prison education, which is, again, such a blessing. And I hope that I'm able to be a blessing to others in this. So I just want to share a little bit about the impact that prison education has from our perspective and our goals, our purposes, and how UNC and philosophy and humanities factor into that. So I just want to share a quote with you. Education is liberation inside and outside of these prison walls. Education is the centerpiece of all human transformation. And I count that as an amazing quote that kind of leads my role in this, that we are trying to provide liberation and human transformation and opportunities for those who are incarcerated. So I'll just jump right in. Here are some quotes from some actual inmates, offenders who are incarcerated in North Carolina who have participated in the UNC classes. And I thought I would start with that because it really tells a lot of the story, actually. So some of the quotes: I never knew I could learn like this. I never thought I could go to college. I can do this even though I thought I couldn't. It was hilarious when one said, my brain hurts, but I like it. Others said, I'm learning new ways to think about things. And when is another class coming? I've taken all that have been offered, which is such a great problem to have. And so we work to get more new and innovative programs in. But that tells you the kind of life-changing liberation and human transformation that we are trying to provide, and hopefully have done so in some cases. So this is kind of interesting to me, the goals of education. Did you know that formal education was proposed as a cure for crime 2,400 years ago by Aristotle, as a matter of fact? And look at the goals there. Both had the same goal to teach literacy, academics, and we added vocational for employment. Both had the same goal, to teach morality, rational thinking, and responsibility. And then a little difference here, Aristotle said to teach how to be socially proficient and to govern appropriately. And our goal is to teach them how to live successfully in society and follow the law. Not that different. And of course, one of our other goals is to help them manage incarceration. And what we mean by that is to help people who are incarcerated to grow, to learn, to be academically and intellectually stimulated, and to really thrive as much as possible while they are incarcerated. So a little bit about the history of prison education. I just think it's phenomenal that as far back as Aristotle and through this entire the 19th and 20th century, this has been a conversation. And so in the 19th century, the leaders believed that there were thinking errors. I call them thinking errors. That's not an official term, but you can imagine what we mean by that. And so their purpose then was to develop prisoners' thinking and behaviors. In the early 20th century, it was inconsistent, formal education was, and we leased out offenders to landowners and businesses, and there wasn't really time for education. We move on to the early 20th, a little bit later in the 20th century, and prison industries were established to teach employable skills. And interestingly, we still do that. We have education programs that coordinate and collaborate with prison industries and actually try to have people employed while they're incarcerated, but also once they are released. And then mid-20th century was really the beginning of academic and vocational programming in prison, kind of like, much like we see it today. And a goal is to help offenders with employment, both again, while they're incarcerated and upon release, because obviously being employed upon release is a measure of success and helps them to be able to live and function on the outside in a productive manner. Did you also, relevant data. I find this also fascinating that there are 2.3 million incarcerated individuals in America. That's as of 2020. 76.6% of those recidivate within 5 years. That's as of 2014. That's 3 out of every 4 offenders come back to prison within 5 years. That is a staggering number to me. At the same time, 95% of all of the offenders in state prisons will be released from prison at some point, and they will be your neighbors and mine in our communities. So everyone, to me, in my opinion, everyone should have a stake in helping them to be successful and helping them to thrive once they are released. North Carolina, interestingly, has a 3-year recidivism rate of 40%, which we're a little bit proud of, but it's not good enough. And we continue to work toward that. And Virginia has the lowest recidivism rate in the United States as of 2021. If offenders are participating in prison education programs, they are 33% less likely to return to prison. And not surprisingly, lower literacy rates do lead to a higher rate of recidivism. So there are some missions that come out of that data, in my opinion. Also, did you know, 36% of inmates in North Carolina prisons have a reading level below 6th grade level. And newspapers, think about that for just a minute, because newspapers are written at a 6th grade level. So 1/3 of all incarcerated individuals cannot read a newspaper and comprehend that. However, on a positive note, offenders who participate in college education are 72% less likely to return to prison. And I would argue that was from 2004. I would argue that number that percentage has actually gone up throughout the years as we get better at providing that, and as we partner with more, certainly with UNC and other colleges as well. So executive dysfunction. Executive dysfunctions are impulse control, attention, planning, the ability to choose better or different behaviors, the skills that we use every day to control ourselves and to make good choices. They're critical for regulating oneself. And if we think about people who are incarcerated, most times, and I've worked, as Raphael said, in 2 prisons as the principal of the educational programming, and now in all 53 prisons in North Carolina. And there are so many good people who just made a bad decision. And that goes directly to executive function and the need for them to be able to self-regulate. And Interestingly, the prison environment resembles a sedentary, which is not surprising, but also impoverished environment. This is from Hart in 2015, which has been shown to reduce capacity for executive functions. So the prison environment in and of itself has been shown to reduce executive function. So how do we combat that? So academic education has been shown to combat executive dysfunction and to increase executive functions. Philosophy and humanities courses certainly have done that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well as we go forward. But they teach people how to think and how to think about things in different ways, and that in and of itself, critical thinking is a critical skill in increasing those executive functions. Vocational education, cognitive behavior intervention training, and physical activity. And that's a really important part that I think is sometimes discounted, but it really does, and it helps us as well. We know it gets more brain flow, blood flow going to the brain, and it just helps us to be able to clear our heads and think a little bit better sometimes when we get overwhelmed. So the UNC Friday Center has been really instrumental, and I have thoroughly enjoyed working with Dr. Ginsberg and Dr. Vasquez in providing these transferable courses for offenders that are in my care. They also provide tutoring for students. They provided philosophy and other humanities courses, and one of those was philosophy by mail, and I just wanted to talk briefly about that. So at the time this began, I was the principal at Granville Correctional Institution, used to be called Polk. And we just were really exploding with educational opportunities, both with UNC and other things as well. And I thought philosophy by mail, and that was a program that was kind of, this is highly minimizing it, but it was kind of like a pen pal situation, if you will. It was a correspondence course, but not for credit. And offenders within the prison were able to receive prompts from the college, from the university, and then correspond with volunteers and people. I'm not sure who they all even were. They may have been some professors, instructors, students. I'm not sure, volunteers. They were able to correspond with those people. And I didn't want to give up that opportunity, but couldn't offer it really in the space where in the school area. So we offered it to those on what we call HCON. And HCON is the highest security level in North Carolina. There is only one prison that houses HCON offenders, and there are only about 85 of them in the state of North Carolina. And they're not allowed to participate in typical education programs. And so we offered it to them, and it was amazing the response we had. I had more people interested than could potentially ever participate, given the number of volunteers that we had. And so it was just so interesting and refreshing to see that even those who are on the highest security level in North Carolina were so interested in stimulating their brains and talking to other people about philosophical conversations and other topics that were thought-provoking to really, hopefully, increase those executive functions, but also just help them to be able to use their brain that they're not able to use at times, in their current incarceration. So it was a wonderful experience. And also, as Dr. Ginsberg mentioned, UNC has been instrumental in the creation of a prison education consortium, which is a partnership and a collaboration between the colleges and universities that we work with in DPS. And it's such a wonderful collaboration to be able to talk with everybody about common goals and the direction that we're going in prison education. We also notably work with 7 other colleges and universities right now and 41 of our community colleges in North Carolina. So I promised I would talk about why philosophy and the humanities. As we talked about a little bit, it does help increase those executive functions. It helps correct those thinking errors that I mentioned earlier today. The things that people truly believe is the way the world works because that's what they grew up in, or that's what they learned growing up. And it's unfortunately sometimes not the way really the world works. And I can't tell you how many times in a day even that I encounter things like that, where people who have had or successful in the world would hear somebody say some things and you just think that is so not correct. So it helps correct that. It helps improve the way they think about certain things so that they can be more successful. It helps students process and learn to think critically. It helps keep them from being idle. And idleness is a huge problem in prisons. I mean, we all know the saying, idle mind is the devil's workshop, but it really does help them, I believe, to keep them from being idle, to give them productive things to think about and to participate in, and they enjoy it. At least the ones that I've worked with have really, really enjoyed it, and they appreciate having things to do that are useful, and particularly philosophy and the humanities. And interestingly, also, often they don't even know what that is until they get involved in it. They say, what is philosophy, or what are the humanities? What is sociology? And then they come back a week or two after starting and they say, thank you so much for letting me in these classes. It's really helping me in these particular ways that are highlighted here. It increases self-esteem and self-confidence. And I just really want to take a minute and highlight that one. I cannot emphasize that one enough. I want to give you a couple of examples. There's a guy, we'll call him Jason, and he was at Granville with me and participated. Well, I kind of made him. He graduated from high school with his high school equivalency at Granville under my principalship, and I kind of made him participate in his first UNC class. And the reason I made him was because I knew that he could, but he did not know that he could. And so I really forced him on some level to do that. And after the fact, he came to me, and he's one of those that made the comments in the beginning. And he's actually the one that said, my brain hurts, but I like it. And it was such a rewarding thing for him, and also for me to hear that. Another guy has worked currently, and he said he just tried and tried and tried until he finally got it. He finally understood what they were talking about. He didn't in the beginning, but once they get that first taste of success, they want more and more and more of it. So, and I could give you countless examples of that, but in the interest of time, I'll move on. And of course, the examples that I mentioned earlier. Here are some critical components of prison education. And UNC is so good, and their instructors have been so good at providing meaningful, relevant, differentiated lessons for our students that really challenge them, and they support them. One other thing that is so critical in prison education is to treat the students with respect, and also to demand that. It is not something that they encounter on a daily basis in their housing unit necessarily. Sometimes they do, and we hope that they do, but we want to ensure that in educational programming, they are in a respectful environment that treats them like they are real, they are students, because they are students. We want to make sure it's a non-judgmental environment for them that teaches them critical thinking skills and self-confidence and character education. But staff and administration support is absolutely critical. And now working with 53 facilities, I try to choose, I have a say now, which is wonderful, about which prisons we do offer that in. And I just can't highlight the need for that staff and administration support from the prison setting enough. So I thought this would be funny, that what people think it's like teaching in a prison. You think, if you've seen the show Lock Up or Orange is the New Black, you think it is like that, and a very dangerous place to be. Many people are scared of teaching in a prison. And I won't tell you that none of that is true. Some of that is true, but it is not true in the education settings. What we see in the education settings, and I 100% believe it's because of the respect and the environment that we create within that setting. It becomes a neutral ground for students, which is wonderful. There's an officer available immediately in case there's any issue. But just to give you a little frame of reference, I do not know of any fight in a prison education setting or any violence in a prison education setting in North Carolina since 2003. That is almost 20 years. And so if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what would. We mostly have grateful students. Students, they do need encouragement and they need assistance because they are not used to that. And that environment, but they are not violent in that setting. The environment itself can be somewhat unpredictable, but the students have been absolutely wonderful. And I'll talk more about the unpredictability here. So as wonderful as prison education is, and as wonderful as our partnership with UNC and the philosophy department there are still barriers to prison education. And this, I think, is the case probably everywhere in the country at this point. Scheduling is a difficult thing. There are certain times that things have to happen, like count. Count is when in a prison, they literally count all of the offenders that are in the prison. And they do that obviously to make sure that there hasn't been an escape and that everybody can be accounted for. But it is a very strict time, as you can imagine. And so nothing happens during count. So if count lasts too long or they call it early, then that can affect our schedules, and that can definitely present problems sometimes. There's little to no technology up until this point, but we are currently working, I'm so proud to say we are working to improve that in all of our facilities. And we have begun that, and we now have some intranet in 3 facilities in North Carolina, and our plan is to make that to put that in all of them. I'm just going to highlight a couple others. The shortage of staff is just critical, and obviously you can't have programming without staff, and that would be and in that I'm talking about mostly officers and prison staff, but also sometimes there's a lack of instructors. I know that some of our programs can't run at times because of that misunderstanding about what prison is like here, thinking that it's like lockup or Orange is the New Black in the classroom. But it's so not. And if people knew what it is like, I think we would have people just chomping at the bit to get to us. And I hope that we will get to that point. And then boundaries are critical. Boundaries, you have to have boundaries because we want to make sure that no lines are crossed. That would minimize the effectiveness that we'd be able to have and the respect that we would garner. And we certainly don't want to jeopardize either of those. And just one last thing, the importance of these aspects cannot be overstated. And I'll let you read those, but true support from administration is, as I mentioned earlier, critical. And the next one, the dedicated and caring educators. If you're an instructor, if you're a professor, if you ever thought about working in a prison, I would ask that you make sure you are this: dedicated and caring educators working directly with offenders, which we will call students, believing in them and providing hope to them. There is no place for judgment at all. And like I said, so many of them are just good people who made a bad decision. And, we want to make sure that they have a second chance with education, and go back to that first quote that we're trying to provide liberation inside and outside of those walls, and that we're trying to provide human transformation through education. It just opens up so many choices and opportunities, as all of you who are educators know. And then the rest of those: dedicated time and space, appropriate training for staff, appropriate training for instructors, and then everybody has to be on the same page. And we work very hard in North Carolina to make sure that that does take place as we have instructors come into the facilities. We want them to be successful, and they want to be successful. And as we have the same goals, that is just a beautiful, beautiful thing. That really concludes my presentation of prison education. I'm happy to answer some questions in a little while if there are some, and I'll just put up very quickly my sources here. I'm happy to send this to anyone who would like it at any point. But in the meantime, thank you again so much for allowing me to be here. Thank you for having me and for being open to this opportunity.
Sorry, I was muted. I was vigorously writing wonderful presentation, Ms. Wheeler, when it was my turn to transition to Titus Williams. Titus, it's great to have you here. I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Hi, Mr. Ginsberg. I'm glad to be on with you guys. If you guys don't know, I'm a former inmate. Currently, I've been home approximately 11 months. This month coming up will make a whole entire year. I think that education in prison is very, very important. As Ms. Wheeler said, hello?
You're good, Titus. You're good.
Oh, okay. All right.
Crystal clear.
Okay. I had an incoming call. I thought I might have ended you guys' call. Excuse me. I'm still trying to catch with technology, but however, as Ms. Wheeler said, it is very important in our prison system to have education. It gives individuals such as myself, I can speak for myself from personal experience, it gives you a sense of purpose, a sense of worthiness. These individuals that we have who we are dispensing this education to will be these same individuals that will be your neighbors, that will be back in society. We don't want anyone to return back in our society the way that they came. We want them to be more educated. We want them to have opportunities just like every other individual. As she said as well, there are several individuals that were in that situation that are good people who honestly made a mistake and just needed this opportunity to get back on track and to allow themselves to be focused in life. Some of the things I wanna point on, like as she said, as far as like having a sense of direction. Education does that for individuals in there. I can again vouch for that because of my participation and former inmates who I'm currently out here with, how important that education was for them and what it has done for them in society. Education with opportunity produces productivity. So you have that with myself personally. Some of the things I want to kind of speak on, I was kind of in and out. I don't know if you guys noticed my phone was acting up. And again, I'm still becoming abreast with technology, so excuse me if I'm kind of like off. But I think that it would be helpful when we speak about the shortage of staff or the shortage of professors who are available to go in and give education. One of the things I would like to see is that if possible, to have internet installed in the prison system, and that way, if we're faced with these obstacles such as a shortage of staff, you don't physically have to be there. You can cast a web and you can reach a broad mass of people via Zoom. You will be able to reach not only just inmates, but you'll be able to reach more than one prison, which was set a classroom setting. So that is one of my suggestions when we speak about a shortage of staff and things of that nature. However, I know the big thing at DPS is security, but there are ways in which this can be done to enhance and to move the programs forward. And I would like to see not only just these vocational classes and these correspondence classes, but when I initially came to prison, an individual was able to obtain a associate degree or a bachelor's degree. Those things I would like to see reinstituted because of like people such as Mr. Raphael Ginsberg. He was very influential in who I came in my development in as a man and believing in myself, even though I had confidence, he really enhanced that. And he showed a care and a compassion for me as an individual. And I'm forever in debt. I'm forever grateful for his willingness to invest and believe in us as a class. You know, he really, we really thrive in even though our circumstances were what they were, we really thrived in those moments because of his passion for us as his students. We didn't get the sense of, you know, that we were less than those individuals who were actually on campus. He gave us a sense, you know, you guys are my students and I believe in you. So with that being said, I believe in myself even more. So education is very, very important in our prison system. Like I said, these individuals such as myself, you know, I'm here, I'm back amongst society. So would you want me to return uneducated, having no sense of direction? Or would you want me to have an education so that when the opportunity presents itself, that I'm able to seize that opportunity, that I'm able to be productive in society? So these are the things that those individuals, I'm not saying that anyone is, but those individuals who are against educating inmates, I think we should reconsider and think about that again, as the statistics show that 95% of us will be returning back in society. So we don't want those people coming out there as they came in. We want them to come out educated so that if given the opportunity, they can move forward and flourish out here. So and that's pretty much my input as far as that. If anybody has any questions for me as far as my experiences, I'm open to answer them to the best of my ability. And I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Ginsberg, whoever wants to speak.
Well, that's a big category, whoever wants to speak, Titus, but it is Michael's turn next. Titus,
Okay.
thank you so much. Thank you, Titus. It was really nice to hear. All right, Michael.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thank you so much, both Titus and Ms. Wheeler. Really insightful, powerful, informative, helpful conversation starters. I learned a lot just in those past few moments. Thank you for that. I just wanted to say something about sort of the philosophy and humanities education efforts in our department and focus a little bit on a slightly different angle, namely kind of juvenile justice education in North Carolina. So we work with folks across the lifespan, actually, as a department of philosophy with our outreach efforts. And we couldn't do it without the kind of vision and leadership and expertise of folks like Ms. Wheeler and folks at the North Carolina Department of Public Safety. And in particular, at Juvenile Education Services, we've recently started working with some of the folks at the central office there and the leadership and the educators at Cabarrus Youth Development Center in Concord. And I think there's some kind of takeaways. I just want to tell you a little bit about that work that might be of interest and sort of show something about the promise and potential here of this kind of programming. But really, big picture, philosophy and humanities, we keep kind of touching upon these disciplines, these courses of study that are distinct or special in a certain kind of way. And I think it's really worth just foregrounding that philosophy in particular, which is a kind of it's a humanities discipline. It's a discipline interested in answering questions about the human condition. Is in the business of asking questions that every human being asks. What's the nature of reality? How should I live my life? What's the best way for us to arrange ourselves politically? These are questions that even if you haven't thought about them, you've answered them in some sense. You've maybe you've assumed some answer about them. If you've lived a human life, if you've navigated the world, you've reflected on these kinds of questions, or you've taken them for granted. And what's interesting about philosophy and humanities then is that you're taking something that's really human, really natural, a kind of impulse that comes naturally to ask these questions, and you're refining it like a skill, you're practicing it. And in particular, creating a space for that to happen over dialogue. That is, it's a kind of ongoing, open-ended conversation in the company of other people. It's not like there's one person who has all the answer. There's no sage on the stage. There's no body of knowledge you need to memorize. These questions are hard, and for thousands of years, they've troubled people. And trying to answer them is a really important part of living a happy, autonomous, meaningful human life, at least trying to make progress on these questions. And I think as Ms. Wheeler and Titus both nicely highlighted, you take courses and you study the humanities, you study philosophy, in developing those skills that are associated with answering these questions, you're developing skills that are useful. They're useful to you, they're useful to other people, to society, whether it's for employment purposes like critical thinking and logical thinking, or civic mindedness and humility. These are all useful both for an individual and for the world at large. And so just to kind of highlight ways in which we try to bring philosophy not only to North Carolina Department of Public Safety through the adult prisons, whether philosophy by mail, but also to juvenile justice, I want to tell you a couple sort of anecdotes about our experiences. On the prison side, I just want to highlight that philosophy by mail, which was this kind of asynchronous, non-credit enrichment opportunity that we came up with during the pandemic, I really commend that as a very simple kind of program that other humanities departments, other pockets of higher education can implement. A pretty simple structure of getting volunteers. We had UNC philosophers corresponding with participants in various prisons, sending kind of the requisite materials and a kind of cover letter and readings and discussion questions, and then initiating a conversation. It's a real discussion. We couldn't predict where they would go. Every conversation was different, highly personalized. And it was really valuable to be able to do that kind of slowly. I call it slow philosophy. There might be weeks in between each letter, but you really get to kind of dwell on and reflect on the questions you're taking up. So philosophy by mail, I really can imagine it being any number of humanities or other disciplines by mail, insert name here. And I think those can be done for credit or for enrichment opportunities more generally. On the juvenile justice side, I just want to highlight this really successful partnership that we're grateful for with Juvenile Education Services that we started over a year ago. And JES, they provide the kind of oversight of educational programming in youth development centers and juvenile detention centers in the state of North Carolina. And as juvenile justice facilities, they're charged with fulfilling all the mandates that come with traditional schooling for folks of that age. So for us, what that partnership has largely looked like is integration into the classroom, the same kind of thing we do for K to 12 schools of any variety, or high schools that we work with across the state of North Carolina, especially in the Triangle area. So I'll just mention, and partly by way of addressing one of the excellent questions, there's been a number of excellent questions in the chat, the one by Julia about literacy. We actually ran a program at Cabarrus Youth Development Center, which involved twice weekly meetings about Plato's Republic, which is kind of this famous dialogue of ancient philosophy. It was integrated into a social studies classroom, thanks to both the educators there and the principal, Mr. Madhu, for kind of seeing this program through as a really innovative and new opportunity. And this is a book. It's a long dialogue, a long book that, in consultation with the educators, we determined was at the right level of literacy, the right level of kind of conceptual and grammatical difficulty. And we had wonderful discussions. The book itself is a dialogue, and the reason we wanted that was it kind of emulates the kind of thing we're trying to produce, which is a discussion, doing philosophy in real time, not having all the answers, inviting people into this exciting world of ideas, asking questions like, if I could design the ideal city from scratch, this is what it would look like. This is what happiness is. This is what virtue is, and so on. Those are the questions that book takes up and invites you to consider. And, we built around that with the help of the Cabarrus, educational team, the right kind of scaffolding, vocabulary, context, connections to current events. And I'll just mention a couple of the bits of feedback we got from the students who were involved in the kind of free response section. We heard from one student, I enjoyed having deep conversations. Another said, the class pushed students to think outside the box and to value others' opinions. One person noted that the readings in Plato really spoke to current events, and that's kind of really important, I think. In one heartwarming comment, a student said that the only thing they would change about the program is the fact that it ended because they enjoyed it so much. And we really, I think, can see from the feedback we got here that students really enjoyed it, really were finding the educational opportunity engaging and interesting. And here's one really interesting thing we did not predict. Not only did the students find it interesting and engaging, the adult staff, the teachers, the folks that were there in the room when we started this program were also interested in getting involved. And that's the thing I think you'll find with philosophy and with humanities, educational opportunities, they're contagious. I mean, these are questions and ideas everybody wants to work through, and it is so fulfilling to work through them with other people. And so we noticed this trajectory of the program where the teachers and the adults in the room were getting more and more involved. And we kind of expanded our community a little bit and had a discussion that involved the students and the staff that were involved at the facility. So much so, and we kind of capitalized on that momentum, that we took the opportunity to supplement that in-class programming and offer professional development programming rooted in the philosophy and humanities content for juvenile justice educators and staff. And so it became this kind of professional development, adult-facing opportunity within the juvenile justice network. And I think it's just a really a testament to the fact that these disciplines and philosophy in particular are getting at something very human, and they're inviting us to exercise some very basic impulses about thinking and wondering and collaborating. And then that's contagious. So that's a little bit about those partnerships. Happy to say more about what they look like. We're really excited that those professional development programs are continuing, and that we'll be having an intensive workshop at the campus of here on the campus of UNC Chapel Hill with those juvenile educators in May. And that's the kind of trajectory it's taken. So thanks so much for listening. I look forward to possibly taking up folks' questions. I really appreciate your time today.
So we've gotten some awesome questions in the chat, and I have tried to answer them in the chat and then also in the Q&A. So hopefully I've done a decent job of it, but I really want to ask Titus and Ms. Wheeler a question about community. So we're here, this is Engagement Week. It's about how UNC Chapel Hill can engage with the community around us. So this is a clear example of that. But I want to ask how we have instructors going in to prisons and teaching classes and all the wonderful work that Michael does, but they don't represent UNC community. I don't mean to say they're inconsistent with it, but they don't represent the entirety of the UNC community. And where I would also include undergraduate students, alumni, advisors, student services, the athletic department, everything that makes UNC a community beyond just going to class. My question to you is, how could all of that, the entirety of that community, cultivate and participate in the creating of educational communities in prison?
So I'll respond to that first, I guess. That I think that, Dr. Vasquez really was onto something, I think, with that philosophy by mail program. And I'm thinking, and I think somebody mentioned that it could be expanded. I think there are so many people who are incarcerated who would just love to have conversations, whether it's in person or whether it is through written correspondence. They just really, it really inspires them to do things that they never thought they could, or think about things, and like you said, outside of the box. So that's perhaps one way. I would love to coordinate with our prisons to have speakers come in from various aspects of that. I think we have certain prisons that would be really, really responsive to that. Let me think a little bit more in case Titus has something he wants to add.
It's like Titus is.
Oh, is he gone?
He's gone. I bet he'll come back. Yeah, it's just, I know, Ms. Wheeler, you're a UNC alum, and I'm sure you took many.
Go Heels.
You took many wonderful courses, but they were asked, of course, there was so much of your college experience that wasn't just about being in the room with an instructor. And so what can any of that be brought into prison? That's a bananas question, but it's also not. That's exactly what the goal should be. what happens really, what succeeds on UNC's campus, to the degree that we can replicate that in prison, that's all to the good. So yeah, that's always my ambition, is to figure out how to mobilize UNC as a community to create community in prison around education. So
Raphael, excuse me, I don't know if you guys knows, again, my phone is acting up, my service code. If someone could, I'm kindly asking, could you just abreast me to what I missed out on? Because I missed like 5 or 10 minutes. And again, excuse me, I'm still being acclimated with technology. So could you please just refresh me if you have a few minutes to do so?
Not much. I don't. I asked how we could create more academic community in prison, and community kind of a little more than just an instructor. Like, what would UNC in prison at its best look like, Titus? You know, like, how could that be fleshed out? How could it be more? And it could be more classes. I get that. But are there other ways in which it can become kind of three-dimensional, fleshed out? You know, the wonderful experiences that the conventional undergrads have on campus. Can any of those resources be brought in to create community? There is community. You know, Titus, we had it in the classroom. Miss Wheeler, you've seen it a million times. I don't mean to diminish what happens, but yeah, I'll stop there.
I mean, just the small gist of what I feel like there should be some type of program created in which is all inclusive, where not only do we feel like students inside of prison, but belonging to the UNC family, because actually we're actually in all actuality, we're actually getting credits. We're doing the same thing that all other students are doing. We're putting the same work that all other students are doing. So why be deprived of those things in which they are afforded and we're not? I understand that there are certain circumstances. I understand that, you know, we've been penalized and we've been put in prison, but at the same time, when it comes to education, we're putting the same work. So I feel like as a whole, as a community, it can be a pulling together to make us feel like we are worthy or deserving as everyone else that is actually participating on campus, even though we're not on campus. Whether as I said, whether it's via Zoom or however, you know, if students meet those accomplishments, if they go through these curriculums and they are as successful as a student actually on UNC, then why not acknowledge their achievements as well? You know, so as a whole, I think people can be more. I don't want to say giving more recognition, versus being I think pushed to the back because we are prisoners. It could be more. It could be more as far as community-wise from the whole establishment. You know, the current thing they're doing, as I said, you know, I myself, I'm appreciative because again, it helped me develop and to become who I am. However, again, I feel like that more can be, you know, acknowledging these students, acknowledging their accomplishment, you know, and it's not for other people to recognize, but it's good to be recognized as human beings. I don't care who you are. It's good to be recognized as human beings and for your accomplishment. So, you know, those other programs, the basketball program, and those individuals who are not actually participating, however they can come together and make us feel a part of that family, I think could be done. Like I say, whether it's through Zoom or whatever, you know, acknowledging these students, something such as that nature, I feel like will make the experience better. Even though my experience was great, but you can always add on and build and that facet to me.
I do. Thank you, Titus. I think that's a great idea. And I think I have a couple of other ideas too. You know, maybe we could do some seminars or some clubs. You know, offenders who are in minimum custody prisons can have their own clothing. Maybe we could give them a t-shirt, you know, help them just understand. I think Titus has a point there that often students who are in courses at UNC and other schools too don't realize that the courses are truly through that school that they, I often say your diploma is not from the Department of Public Safety. Your transcript does not say, Granville Prison. And they go, oh, really? It's just, a small thing that we take for granted, but they don't really understand until we explain it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I really quickly, I just wanted to reiterate both what Titus and Ms. Wheeler said, and really this idea that it is in some cases as simple as thinking what really works well on the university campus in terms of conduciveness to a educational environment that is affirming, that is engaging, that and sort of think of ways creatively or just simply to kind of offer them to different communities. Sometimes it is as simple as that. I think that's partly the inspiration with the Philosophy by Mail program. I love the idea of colloquia or talks, like department talks and events are a regular feature of university campuses, and undergrads get to go. They're not always required to go, and maybe they get hit by a new idea and they choose a new major, they choose a new life course. Those kinds of opportunities that are conditions for success on a college campus, recreate them to the extent possible, share them with the world. That's all I would add.
Can I interject one more thing too?
Please.
As well. And also given because it seems to be that students in prison are limited to what they can accomplish and what they can do. I think they should be afforded the opportunity to, if possible, with its correspondence, because we don't actually have it on the facility and have it being given on the facilities anymore. But I think that they should be given the opportunity to earn a degree if possible, because like I said, given the work that's being put in, why be denied that opportunity? So if I'm getting credits and I'm taking philosophy, and I want to continue on with that, why not offer the opportunity for me to get an associate's or a bachelor's or whatever? So that's what I want to add. Giving students an opportunity to actually get a degree, not just get credits, but actually get a degree.
And just to respond to that, that is something that we're definitely looking more into, and we're starting to do. We do it a few places currently, and looking more into that as Pell Grants come back and as funding allows. But that's definitely on our radar, Titus. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I'm fortunate to do this work in North Carolina because NCDPS is for decades been ahead of the curve and really committed in a very principled way to education. So I'm grateful for that. So I'm optimistic about all sorts of great things happening.
We're grateful to work with you too.
Absolutely. If we have people such as yourself, that's willing to go in and dispense the knowledge the way that it was given to me by you, I think we're in great hands.
Thank you, Titus.
Yeah.
Well, I think we.
Yeah, just to be, we'll be mindful of the time here, and it's 2:00. We can formally conclude there and adjourn. We hope you'll stay in touch. We are really grateful that you joined us on a Friday afternoon, and we're so grateful to Titus and Ms. Wheeler for that insight and for your comments, for your time. Thank you, everybody. Reach out to us, be in touch. Thank you for kind of celebrating Engagement Week with us, and thanks to the folks at Carolina Center for Public Service for making it happen. With that, we'll kind of formally conclude. Thanks again.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having me as well. It was my pleasure.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Michael.